Picture the year 1717. Stand upon a heaving Atlantic Ocean beneath a sky the color of forged iron. Smell tar bubbling from freshly caulked seams, salt crusting every strand of hemp rigging, and wet oak timbers swollen by years of punishment from wind and sea. Hear the groan of futtocks deep inside a ship's hull as hundreds of tons of timber flex against powerful swells. Listen to blocks hammer against masts, towering more than 100 feet above the waterline while canvas snaps like musket volleys overhead. Then imagine a lookout suddenly freezing in place. Through morning fog, a dark silhouette appears. At first it seems like another merchant vessel. Then details emerge. 3 masts, heavy rigging, a hull riding low from the weight of guns, and above everything else, a black banner whipping violently in the wind. Fear spreads faster than fire through dry canvas, not because sailors know exactly what ship approaches. They fear it because they suspect the answer. During the Golden Age of Piracy, dozens of notorious pirate vessels hunted the shipping lanes of the Atlantic. Some were fast, others carried impressive firepower. Yet one ship became so feared that its mere appearance often forced entire crews to surrender without a fight. That vessel was Queen Anne's Revenge, the floating fortress commanded by the infamous pirate Blackbeard. To understand why this ship terrified sailors more than almost any pirate vessel in history, one must first understand the brutal realities of naval warfare in the early 18th century. Merchant ships crossing the Atlantic transported fortunes measured in sugar, tobacco, indigo, cocoa, silver, gold, and manufactured goods. A single successful voyage could generate profits exceeding several years of wages for ordinary sailors. Yet these riches traveled through oceans where naval protection remained limited. Ships depended upon speed, luck, and favorable weather. Pirates exploited every weakness. Most pirate vessels began as captured merchant ships modified for raiding. They sacrificed cargo space for speed and combat efficiency. Guns replaced storage. Extra hands replaced merchants. Every aspect of design focused upon one purpose: taking another ship. But Queen Anne's Revenge represented something entirely different. Originally launched around 1710 as a French slave ship named La Concorde, the vessel measured approximately 100 feet in length and displaced nearly 300 tons. She had been specifically designed for the horrific transatlantic slave trade. This meant she possessed enormous cargo capacity, exceptional endurance, and a hull engineered to survive months at sea. Her construction involved massive oak frames, thick hull planking, and reinforced deck beams capable of supporting tremendous weight. The ship's tumble home narrowed slightly above the waterline, increasing stability while making boarding attacks more difficult. Every timber reflected the brutal economics of an industry transporting human beings across oceans. Ironically, these same characteristics later transformed her into one of history's most dangerous pirate ships. In November 1717, near the island of Martinique, Blackbeard intercepted La Concorde after a pursuit that demonstrated precisely why pirates feared and respected him. The French vessel had already suffered heavily from disease. Many crew members were weakened. Blackbeard commanded a small flotilla and quickly surrounded the ship. Faced with overwhelming force, resistance collapsed. The captured vessel immediately attracted Blackbeard's attention. Unlike smaller sloops, favored by many pirates, this ship possessed extraordinary potential. Blackbeard renamed her Queen Anne's Revenge, a title loaded with political symbolism connected to supporters of the deposed Stuart monarchy. The transformation began almost immediately. Additional cannons were installed until the ship carried roughly 40 guns. making her comparable in firepower to certain naval warships. These weapons varied in caliber. Some fired 6-pound iron shot. Others launched heavier projectiles capable of smashing through merchant hulls. Each cannon represented a masterpiece of 18th century metallurgy, cast primarily from iron, weighing between 1,000 and 3,000 pounds, depending upon size. These guns hurled solid spheres with devastating energy. Black powder charges composed of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate ignited within confined chambers. Rapid gas expansion propelled iron shot down smooth bores at velocities capable of shattering oak, planking several feet thick. When cannonballs struck enemy vessels, destruction extended far beyond the point of impact. Oak fibers exploded outward into lethal splinters. Men standing yards away could be killed by fragments traveling faster than musket balls. Entire sections of bulwarks disintegrated, rigging collapsed, masts cracked, chaos followed. Yet guns alone did not make Queen Anne's Revenge terrifying. Her crew elevated her into legend. Historical estimates suggest Blackbeard commanded as many as 300 men. Such numbers exceeded the crews of many merchant vessels several times over. These pirates represented a floating army. During boarding actions, waves of armed attackers could overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers. Pistols, cutlasses, boarding axes, muskets, grenades, and pikes turned the decks of captured ships into scenes of unimaginable violence. The ship itself became a psychological weapon. Blackbeard understood fear better than almost any pirate of his era. Witnesses described him weaving slow-burning fuses into his enormous black beard before battle. Thick smoke curled around his face. Sparks glowed beneath his hat, armed with multiple pistols strapped across his chest. He appeared less like a sailor and more like a creature emerging from hell itself. When this figure stood upon the quarterdeck of a 40-gun warship, approaching through cannon smoke, many crews surrendered before a single shot was fired. The true power of Queen Anne's Revenge emerged during 1718, when Blackbeard established temporary control over large sections of the American coastline. Merchant captains reported sightings with increasing frequency. Insurance rates climbed. Shipping schedules changed. Entire ports discussed little else. The ship's reputation traveled faster than the vessel itself. Imagine standing watch aboard a merchant brig, carrying sugar from the Caribbean. Dawn arrives. Visibility remains poor. Suddenly, a strange sail appears on the horizon. Through a telescope, the outline becomes clearer. Heavy masts, dark hull, numerous gun ports. Even before identification becomes certain, panic begins. Sailors knew exactly what capture could mean. Pirates might recruit skilled crew members by force. Officers could be held for ransom. The cargo would disappear. Resistance often invited brutality. This psychological effect allowed Blackbeard to conserve resources. Battles damaged ships and killed valuable crew. Fear achieved the same results at lower cost. Queen Anne's Revenge became a floating symbol of inevitable defeat. The vessel's design reinforced this impression. Her broad beam provided stability for heavy artillery. Reinforced deck structures supported dozens of cannons and hundreds of men. Multiple boats could be carried for coastal operations. Extensive storage capacity allowed long cruises without resupply. Water casks, food stores, powder magazines, spare rigging, replacement sails, timber for repairs, and captured goods filled every available space. Deep within the hull, massive frames connected keel to deck through a complex skeleton of futtocks, floors, riders, and beams. These structural elements distributed stress generated by waves and combat alike. During storms, forces acting upon the hull could exceed hundreds of tons. Without such engineering, ships simply broke apart. Blackbeard's flagship survived because it possessed the strength originally required for transatlantic voyages. Yet perhaps the most frightening aspect of Queen Anne's revenge involved her role within a larger pirate squadron. Rarely operating alone, she coordinated with supporting vessels that extended Blackbeard's reach. Smaller sloops handled pursuit. Scouts identified targets. Captured prizes expanded resources. Together they created a mobile criminal enterprise spanning thousands of miles. In May 1718, this force executed one of the most audacious pirate operations ever recorded. Blackbeard blockaded Charleston, South Carolina. One of Britain's most important colonial ports suddenly found itself at the mercy of pirates. Ships attempting entry or departure were captured. Passengers became hostages. Commerce halted. The message was unmistakable. A pirate captain operating from a former slave ship now possessed enough power to challenge an entire city. The Charleston blockade revealed why governments increasingly viewed Blackbeard not merely as a criminal, but as a strategic threat. Trade formed the lifeblood of colonial economies. Interrupting commerce threatened merchants, investors, plantation owners, and political leaders simultaneously. Queen Anne's revenge stood at the center of this crisis. Contemporary observers struggled to comprehend how pirates had accumulated such influence. The answer lay partly in naval realities. Oceans remained vast. Warships were expensive. Communication traveled slowly. Pirates exploited these limitations ruthlessly. By the time authorities learned of an attack, the perpetrators often vanished hundreds of miles away. Queen Anne's revenge amplified this mobility through size and capability. Unlike smaller vessels forced to remain near supply sources, Blackbeard's flagship could sustain extended operations. Large water reserves reduced dependence upon ports. Extensive food storage increased endurance. Spare spars, sailcloth, cordage, and tools allowed repairs at sea. Even careening operations could be conducted in remote anchorages. Careening involved deliberately beaching a vessel to expose portions of the hull below the waterline. Crews scraped away barnacles, repaired damage, and applied protective coatings of tar and pitch. Such maintenance preserved speed and prevented structural deterioration. Every aspect of maritime survival demanded labor. Hundreds of blocks required inspection. Miles of rigging needed replacement. Pumps operated constantly to remove water leaking through seams. Powder had to remain dry. Iron fittings corroded. Sails tore. Yet pirate crews often embraced these hardships because they shared profits through articles of agreement. Unlike merchant sailors receiving fixed wages, pirates divided captured wealth according to predetermined rules. Compensation existed even for injuries. Loss of an arm, leg, eye, or finger carried specific payments. This system encouraged loyalty and combat effectiveness. Blackbeard commanded not merely through fear, but through incentives. A successful capture could transform an ordinary sailor's fortunes overnight. Queen Anne's revenge functioned as both warship and economic machine. Each raid generated wealth. Wealth attracted recruits. Recruits increased power. Power enabled larger raids. The cycle reinforced itself. Meanwhile, stories multiplied. Sailors claimed the ship appeared through fog without warning. Others insisted Blackbeard possessed supernatural protection. Rumors described executions, hidden treasure, and demonic rituals. Most were exaggerated, yet exaggeration itself served the pirates. fear magnified reality. A merchant captain confronting Queen Anne's revenge faced not only 40 guns and hundreds of pirates, but also every terrifying story heard in taverns across the Atlantic world. Ironically, the reign of Queen Anne's revenge proved remarkably brief. In June 1718, only months after the Charleston blockade, disaster struck near Beaufort Inlet in present-day North Carolina. The exact circumstances remain debated by historians. Some believe the ship accidentally grounded upon a sandbar. Others suspect Blackbeard intentionally wrecked the vessel as part of a scheme to reduce crew numbers and increase his personal share of accumulated loot. Whatever the truth, Queen Anne's revenge ran aground and could not be recovered. For any ordinary pirate captain, the loss of a flagship carrying 40 guns would have been catastrophic, yet Blackbeard adapted quickly. Valuable supplies, weapons, and treasure were salvaged where possible. Crew members transferred to smaller vessels. The pirate continued operations. Nevertheless, the wreck marked the beginning of the end. Without his mighty flagship, Blackbeard's aura of invincibility weakened. Colonial authorities intensified efforts against piracy. The British Empire increasingly recognized that tolerating pirate activity threatened commerce on an unacceptable scale. Naval patrols expanded. Governors offered pardons to pirates willing to surrender. Rewards encouraged hunters to pursue notorious captains. Blackbeard remained defiant. His reputation still inspired fear, but circumstances changed rapidly. The same interconnected maritime world that had enabled his rise now facilitated his downfall. Reports circulated faster, coordination improved, political pressure mounted. The terrifying ship that once dominated coastal waters now rested beneath shifting sands. Yet even as a wreck, Queen Anne's revenge retained influence. Stories surrounding the vessel continued spreading. Survivors recounted encounters. Merchants exaggerated dangers. Sailors transformed facts into legends. Memory proved more durable than timber. Beneath the sea, iron cannons slowly accumulated layers of corrosion. Wooden beams disappeared beneath sediment. Organic materials decayed. Nature reclaimed what human ambition had created, but the image endured. A black-bearded pirate standing amid smoke aboard a heavily armed fortress of oak and iron. More than 3 centuries later, archaeologists searching waters near Beaufort Inlet discovered evidence supporting identification of the wreck as Queen Anne's revenge. Excavations revealed cannons, anchors, medical instruments, navigational tools, and countless artifacts, offering extraordinary insight into pirate life. These discoveries shattered popular myths while confirming uncomfortable truths. Pirates were not romantic adventurers wandering a carefree ocean. They operated within a brutal world shaped by violence, disease, slavery, imperial competition, and relentless economic pressure. The terrifying reputation of Queen Anne's revenge emerged not from fantasy, but from tangible reality. Consider the ship as a merchant sailor might have seen it in 1718. A vessel roughly 100 feet long, nearly 300 tons of displacement, 40 cannons capable of ripping apart wooden hulls, hundreds of armed pirates eager for plunder, a commander who deliberately cultivated an image of supernatural terror, a crew organized through articles of agreement, yet fully prepared for extreme violence, a squadron capable of blockading major ports, a reputation spreading across oceans faster than any official warning. This combination made Queen Anne's revenge uniquely frightening. Other pirate ships were faster. Some captains achieved greater financial success. Yet few vessels concentrated so many elements of power into a single floating platform. Firepower, manpower, endurance, symbolism, and psychological warfare merged into one terrifying package. The ship's greatest weapon was ultimately not iron, powder, or steel. It was fear. Fear caused merchant captains to surrender valuable cargo without resistance. Fear transformed rumors into legends. Fear elevated Blackbeard from pirate captain into historical icon, and fear ensured that long after oak timbers rotted beneath the Atlantic seabed, the name Queen Anne's Revenge continued haunting maritime history. For sailors navigating the Atlantic during the Golden Age of Piracy, the sight of that dark hull emerging from fog represented something worse than death in battle. It represented uncertainty itself, the loss of freedom, the destruction of livelihoods, the collapse of carefully planned voyages, the realization that law, distance, and civilization offered little protection upon the open ocean. That is the terrifying truth behind the most feared pirate ship in history. Not that it was invincible, not that it possessed supernatural powers, but that for a brief moment in the early 18th century, a converted slave ship commanded by Blackbeard became powerful enough to make entire coastlines tremble. Yet the terror inspired by Queen Anne's Revenge becomes even more impressive when we examine what happened inside the ship during ordinary days at sea. Popular imagination often pictures pirates endlessly drinking rum and celebrating stolen treasure. But the reality aboard Blackbeard's flagship was far harsher. Imagine descending below the main deck through a narrow companionway while the vessel rolls heavily in Atlantic swells. The air immediately changes. Fresh ocean wind disappears. In its place comes the smell of tar, damp timber, gunpowder residue, sweat, mold, bilge water, and livestock. Hundreds of men occupied a space originally designed for a different purpose. Hammocks hung wherever room existed. Personal possessions were limited to what a sailor could carry. Rats moved freely through storage compartments. Fresh water often developed unpleasant flavors after weeks inside wooden casks. Salted beef became hard as timber. Ship biscuits contained weevils so commonly that sailors sometimes accepted them without complaint. Yet despite these conditions, the vessel functioned with remarkable efficiency. Every crew member possessed responsibilities. Top men climbed rigging during storms when a fall from 80 feet almost certainly meant death. Gunners maintained artillery that could kill friendly crew if handled carelessly. Carpenters inspected hull planking for signs of structural weakness. Sailmakers repaired canvas damaged by wind and combat. The ship's surgeon worked with crude instruments whose effectiveness depended as much upon speed as skill. Infection remained a constant threat. A simple splinter could become fatal. A musket wound often killed through disease rather than immediate trauma. During combat, the lower gun deck transformed into a nightmare of smoke and noise. Cannon crews stripped to the waist because temperatures became unbearable. Each gun required a carefully coordinated sequence. Swab the barrel, insert powder charge, ram home wadding, load shot, run out the cannon, aim, fire, then repeat while enemy fire crashed into the hull. The process demanded strength, discipline, and experience. A single mistake could ignite loose powder and kill an entire crew. Queen Anne's Revenge carried enough artillery that broadside volleys could unleash hundreds of pounds of iron within seconds, producing destruction capable of convincing most merchant captains that resistance was hopeless. One reason Blackbeard's flagship became so feared was the simple mathematics of naval combat. Consider a typical merchant vessel crossing the Atlantic In 1718, it might carry 10 to 20 crew members and perhaps a handful of small defensive guns. Its primary purpose involved transporting cargo, not fighting battles. Space inside the hull was dedicated to barrels, crates, and merchandise, rather than soldiers and ammunition. Now compare that vessel to Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard could field nearly 300 men. Even if only a fraction participated directly in boarding operations, defenders faced overwhelming odds. Pirates frequently carried multiple weapons. A boarding fighter might possess 2 pistols, a cutlass, a boarding axe, and a knife simultaneously. Blackbeard understood that victory often depended upon intimidation before combat even began. The ship's black flags varied according to circumstances. Sometimes a victim first saw a seemingly ordinary vessel. Then, once pursuit became unavoidable, pirate colors suddenly appeared. This psychological transition proved devastating. Hope vanished instantly. The approaching vessel transformed from unknown stranger into confirmed predator. Distance slowly closed. Cannon ports opened. Sunlight reflected from iron gun barrels. Men crowded the rails. Drums sounded. Commands echoed across the water. Every minute increased tension. Merchant captains understood exactly what awaited them if they refused surrender. A cannonball striking near the waterline could flood the hull. Rigging damage could leave the ship helpless. A boarding assault could turn decks into slaughterhouses. Consequently, many surrendered before fighting began. Modern observers sometimes mistake this for cowardice. In reality, it reflected practical calculation. Cargo could be replaced. Ships could be rebuilt. Dead crews could not. Blackbeard exploited this logic masterfully. The greatest pirate captains recognized that preserving manpower mattered more than dramatic battles. A captured ship obtained without firing, a shot represented the ideal outcome. Queen Anne's Revenge therefore became famous not merely because of violence, but because violence remained constantly implied. The threat itself achieved results. Another factor rarely discussed involves the weather conditions that shaped every voyage. The Atlantic Ocean represented an enemy as dangerous as any navy. Hurricanes could destroy fleets. Winter storms shattered masts. Rogue waves smashed boats into splinters. Queen Anne's Revenge survived because she had been built for long ocean crossings. Her massive oak frames distributed stress through an intricate network of structural members. The keel formed the backbone. Floors crossed the bottom. Footocks extended upward to create the ship's sides. Deck beams locked everything together. Iron bolts secured critical joints. When enormous waves lifted one end of the vessel while the other remained unsupported, these components absorbed forces measured in hundreds of tons. Sailors actually possessed terminology for the movement. Ships could hog, sag, twist, and work under pressure. Constant creaking signaled the living nature of wooden construction. Every storm tested the vessel. During severe weather, sailors climbed into darkness, illuminated only by flashes of lightning. Rain struck faces like musket pellets. Canvas threatened to tear itself apart. Wind screamed through rigging. Commands became nearly impossible to hear, yet crews still had to reduce sail, secure equipment, and maintain control. A vessel unable to respond quickly might lose a mast. Once a mast collapsed, tons of timber, rope, and canvas could crash onto the deck, killing sailors and crippling maneuverability. Blackbeard's men survived such conditions repeatedly. This experience enhanced their effectiveness in combat. They were hardened by environments most land dwellers could scarcely imagine. To merchants encountering Queen Anne's Revenge, the pirates appeared almost superhuman. They emerged from storms that scattered ordinary shipping. They operated far from ports. They seemed capable of appearing anywhere. In truth, they remained mortal sailors, but sailors possessing skills developed through years of exposure to one of the harshest workplaces on Earth. Their flagship reflected that resilience. Every scar on the hull, every repaired sail, every replaced plank testified to battles not only against enemies, but against the ocean itself.